National Government. Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker, and ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Kia ora. I'd like to greet all members in the chamber, congratulate all those successful members, commiserate and acknowledge all those unsuccessful members. I'd like to acknowledge you, Mr Speaker, in your returning role. And I guess it's fair to acknowledge the government. Good on you for forming a government. I think this side of the House would have preferred it differently, but I'd like to acknowledge you did have the numbers. And what I'd like to touch on is what your plan is for this next 3 years. I'm happy to take a call on this, the address and reply debate, responding to John Key's speech from the throne. I want to touch on what the Prime Minister touched on, which is the 4 key priorities, which is trying to get the government's books into surplus, trying to get a competitive economy, trying to reform the public service, and trying to rebuild Christchurch. I want to look at what they mean for this country, why this government is asking the right questions, but is providing the wrong answers to those 4 priority points: surplus, the economy, public service, and Christchurch. I want to ask the government why, when there's 120 points in the plan, it still doesn't make the grade. I want to ask the government, where's the vision with all those 120 points? I want to show the government benches that we do have options available. We do have options if we keep our assets Kiwi, if we invest in our valuable clean green brand, if we invest in a compassionate economy. We can build a richer New Zealand, a New Zealand for everyone. So firstly, looking at the first government priority, trying to get the government books back into surplus by 2014-2015. It might surprise some of the members, but the Greens support them in this aspect. You know, we support sustainability when it comes to the environment, and we support fiscal and environmental sustainability as well. It's clear the country's got a debt problem. We've got a gross government debt around 33-36% of GDP, and you only have to look at Europe when we see what's happening in Portugal, Ireland, riots on the street in Greece, that we are on an unsustainable track. So we're asking the right question, which is about government debt, but we've come up with the wrong answers. John Key's speech talked about announcing only $800 million of new government spending, cuts to the public sector, further cuts to government departments like DOC getting gutted. Yet what we are seeing is more wasteful spending being announced by the government. Take the motorways. We've got $19 billion being borrowed by the government to pour on these motorways with negative benefit-cost ratios. We've got the government subsidising risky deep-sea oil ventures with $25 million plus and direct subsidies to foreign offshore drillers. We've seen a new irrigation fund. What we're seeing is this government cherry-picking, picking the winners in our economy. We're seeing motorways for truckies, we're seeing special deals for Warners, we're seeing more pokies for Sky City. We're seeing the government picking the winner when it comes to the economy. But it's the taxpayer picking up the tab. We see fiscal austerity as the watchword, but the government is selectively borrowing billions to back these supposed winners, which are going to have huge impacts for our economy and country. When there's 120 points and there's no point when it comes to revenue, you've got to ask some serious questions. Raising revenue has to be part of the question if we're trying to return the government books into surplus. The government said yes to more obscene bonuses. We saw the government say yes for more tax cuts for the super rich, but we saw the government say no to capital gains tax. We saw the government say no to the temporary earthquake levy. We saw the government say no to the small irrigation levy, which would have helped our farmers and our waterways. We were the only party in the last election to go to the public with a plan to actually pay off debt faster. The Green Party went to the public with a plan to be paying off $6 billion in debt over the next 3 years. But what we see from the government benches is playing politics, looking out for their mates, and taking our economy down the wrong road. When it comes to the competitive economy priority of the government, this is again another area where we agree with the government. To help the sustainability of our economy and our environment, we need to be reducing debt, and to do that we need a competitive economy. But again, Mr Speaker, what we see is the wrong answers given to the right question. And the 120-point plan could be summarised in 4 words. I think it would be drill it, mine it. Oil is the biggest strategic risk to our national economy. It's 16% of our imports. That's the largest single share of our national imports. We're seeing wealth directly flow offshore. Every US $1 price rise and the price of oil wipes $40 to $60 billion off our GDP. It's the key area in the Ministry of Economic Development's energy outlook analysis of the country. So if oil's the problem, why is drilling more of it the answer? The pathway to prosperity, Mr Speaker, isn't drilling new risky oil wells in deep hostile environment. It doesn't stack up when New Zealand sells itself far too cheaply. We see hardly any royalties, hardly any taxes, Hardly any jobs for Kiwis. We see the profits flow offshore, yet it's the taxpayer who's picking up the tab when there comes a mess. We see the government with its insurance liability say, sure, you're liable, but you only need $30 million in insurance. We see the government quite happy to see New Zealanders who love their marine environment pay 100% of the environmental costs, yet for only 5% of the value of the oil. What we saw with the Rena tragedy off the Bay of Plenty was that the country isn't prepared to deal with a moderate spill, let alone a risky deep-sea oil well blowout. Mr. Speaker, the only way to achieve oil exports, which is what the government wants to achieve, net oil exports, as in its briefing for the incoming Energy Minister, is to encourage risky deep-sea oil drilling, more hydraulic fracturing or fracking, and digging up the lignite, the lowest grade coal in the country. When it comes to the deep-sea wells, the government plans to dig all over the offshore environment in New Zealand, there's simply no way to plug a well blowout. What we saw in the Gulf of Mexico, even with all those rigs in the environment, 40,000 people ready to respond, they still couldn't plug it for weeks and weeks. I don't know how the government thinks they're going to plug it with their new legislation, the EEZ bill. Yet where they are planning to be placing and allowing these permits for these deep-sea oil rigs is what's known as between the roaring 50s and the roaring 40s and the furious 50s off the Raukumara Basin, one of the most seismically active parts of the country. And when it comes to the bill supposedly giving Kiwis and taxpayers protection from these risky deep-sea oil wells, the EEZ bill, it's really more of an EZ drilling bill, the way it simply facilitates more risky deep-sea oil drilling. The second part of the plan relies on fracking, more fracking across our country. What fracking or hydraulic fracturing or drilling vertical and horizontal wells, letting off explosives, then using drilling fluids which are proprietary, secret and often very toxic to extract oil and gas. What we know from fracking over shore is that it pollutes the groundwater, it pollutes the air, there's significant health worries. And then we also know there's growing evidence, including from prestigious UK and American scientific bodies, that there's a growing evidence of its links with earthquakes. So I don't know why the government's embarking on this risky and very controversial fracking practice. And it's no wonder that New South Wales, Quebec, France, many states in America have put moratoriums on it. And that's what this government should be doing. If they want to look out for the taxpayer, if they want to look out for Kiwis, they should get the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, encourage her to be doing some more research into the risks, and until then, put an immediate moratorium. Now, the nexus of the government's so-called economic development plans of drill it and mine it is their sell it approach. When it comes to the state-owned assets, Solid Energy, one of the state-owned assets on the books, it's their plan to be bringing in billions of dollars of capital to dig up the lignite. The lignite coal... Oh, Mr. Speaker, I couldn't hear the interjections, but I'm sure they weren't any good anyway. But anyway, when it comes to the lignite, Mr. Speaker, we're going to see the taxpayer pick up the bill, hundreds of millions, maybe up to $1 billion, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment reports, for subsidising it through their emissions trading scheme. This is the forefront where we should be using our expertise, investing in innovation like efficient wood pellet products, other wood products, biofuels, which again the government has announced an extension of the grant. This is where we should be planting our effort and our focus to get innovation for prosperity for Kiwis. Like the state assets, which the government want to flog off, it's simple madness. These are assets returning a dividend of 18.5% to pay off debt of only 5%. It doesn't make any sense, Mr. Speaker. They've got no mandate, there's massive opposition in the country, yet on the flip side there's a massive opportunity cost as well. We could be using these assets to drive our prosperity, to be driving our innovation. Mr. Speaker, we've got world-leading expertise in renewable electricity generation already. If we, using our state-owned assets to drive export growth, could only capture 1% of that $800 billion industry, Mr. Speaker, this could be bringing $800 million per annum into the country and 67,000 jobs. So in summary, Mr. Speaker, I ask, where's the vision? Drill it, mine it, isn't enough to lift Kiwis' living standards. Slashing the public sector isn't enough to lift 200,000 Kiwi kids out of poverty. The wasteful spending on the motorways and subsidising polluters isn't enough to protect our wonderful environment and our valuable clean green brand. And the Green Party will be supporting the motion that this House has no confidence in the national government.
Katrina Shanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to take